Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen, whatever time you're tuning in the program here at allpointstv.com. Today we're going to be doing something different. We're going to be taping both for the program here that we normally do at 2 o'clock in the afternoon every Monday from 2 to 3. But we are bringing aboard a new carrier of the program, and that is Comcast. And we'll be coming on that program probably in about 2 weeks. This program is being aired 2 weeks before that time period. But we're coming to you live, those of you who are watching us right now, and those of you who are watching us on the normal feeds, you can pick us up at your leisure. And that's anytime on your computers, and we are right here for you here at the station. We are very delighted to know that we're going to also be airing on the public access channel on Comcast, and that's something new. So we are going to be getting some of the tweaks out, and all the programs here at the studio will be aired at some point there over a interval period where we're going to be rotating our programs here at the studio to the Comcast station. We are delighted as always to have you with us, and we are going to stay hopefully for about an hour here, but 27 minutes for the Comcast program, and John's going to give me the time when that part of the program is over. I want to talk about two topics today, one of which would be the debate that occurred last week, the Republican Party debate, because I want to talk about the appointment of the replacement for Judge Antonin Scalia, who, as you know, died last Saturday. And I want to talk about this because I want to talk about where I think we are erring in terms of what needs to happen right now then in terms of replacement. I don't think we understand how far off we are listening to these politicians who are saying that the president should not make the appointment because he's a lame duck president, and they're saying because this is his last year in office that he should not make the appointment, but forgo that and let the next president coming in who will have a full term to make that assessment. And one of the candidates in the debate last Saturday, the Republican Party debate, said that there's precedent set for it. We haven't had anyone to do this for the last 80 years, and therefore this should not go on at this time. Well, that may well be true about the precedent having been set, but I want to call your attention to the fact that we have a Constitution in this country. And the question is, what does the Constitution require? I think that's the primary issue here, and we ought to be talking about, does the president have the constitutional authority and the duty and responsibility to make the appointment? And then, of course, if there's some objection to the appointment, then the Senate can, as the confirmation body, they can in fact suborn the president's appointment by refusing to confirm the nominee. But to say the president has no authority to do it because he's a lame duck president is nonsense. And it just shows again how much we have disdain in this country for the Constitution, and people are disdainful of it even when they don't even realize that's what this is about. Because to say that the president shouldn't do it because he won't be in office for any period of time, I have to tell you something in the Constitution that mandates this process that's not found in the Constitution. And if you look at Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2. If you read, and I'm going to read that to you where we can all be on the same page here, but if you read Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, you'll read this. And you'll see where the president does have, along with his commanding-in-chief responsibilities, in the same section you find that, you'll find where the president does have the right to make the appointments. And here's what it says. After it says the president shall be the commander-in-chief, that's in Article 2, Section 2, Clause 1. In Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2, it says the following. He, and they're referring back to the president, he shall have the power by and with the advice and consent of the Senate. And then it lists a number of responsibilities, but then it gets to the part about the court, and it says, in a number of appointments that the president can make, it says that he has the power to appoint judges to the Supreme Court. He doesn't give a time period for it. It doesn't say that he should not, in fact, carry out that responsibility if he only has 1 year in office. This is what the politicians are putting into it. The president has every right and every responsibility to fill that position. But in the check and balance system that you have in the United States, what they can do in terms of the Senate is suborn that nomination if the nominee, he or she, does not does not have a record where they have been true to the Constitution mandates. And if they're not shown fidelity to it, then the check and balance system kicks in, and the Senate can, by its vote, decide it's not going to confirm the nominee, and then cause the president to go and get a nominee more suitable to the confirmation. The ones who have to confirm the nomination, those are the senators. And if they continue to refuse that, then that is the process that's in place. But to say the president doesn't have the authority to do it, I think that's a bit much and outside of the constitutional requirement. We have to get back to the Constitution in this country. Now, we're replacing, in Justice Antonin Scalia, we're replacing a giant. I don't know if people have really understood what we lost this past Saturday when Judge Scalia died. But we lost one of the great jurors that this country has ever had. And when you think about John Marshall, I think Marshall was the third Supreme Court Chief Justice, John Jay being the first. Marshall came in, was probably the greatest Chief Justice we had. He was Chief Justice from 1801 to 1835. But when you start talking about great jurors, you got to put at the top of that list, I don't mean at the very top of the list necessarily, but in the top tier parts of that list, you got to put up there the name of Antonin Scalia, who was absolutely great. And what made him great was because he not only took an oath to uphold the Constitution, but understood that the Constitution is a grounding point, really a shackling of the office holders, because what it does is that it closes off options to the interpreters of what it is they can and cannot do. And he went on there, taking an oath, as all of them must do. All federal office holders, really all office holders in the political arena in this country, must take an oath of fidelity to the Constitution. And they all do that with differing levels of commitment to that which they are pledging themselves to do. A lot of them just going through the motion in terms of you put your hands in the Bible or maybe on the Quran today or some other document. We had one president that put his hand on, it wasn't either the Bible or religious text or some other text. I forget the president's name, but he put his hand on some legal document, I think it was, and he held his hand up and swore or affirmed fidelity to the Constitution. But whatever, be that as it may, they all have to affirm that they're going to uphold the Constitution. But very few of them mean it. And we don't see any evidence that these persons that was in that debate this past Saturday, and I'm talking about specific people, Cruz, who claims to be a constitutional scholar, and I know a little bit about the Constitution myself, so I don't see any scholarship here when a person tells me the president should forgo his constitutional responsibility and then let the president that comes in have a full term to make the choice of who the next person would be. And then he said this, which is equally ridiculous and I think outrageous, for him to have said that the next president will be chosen by the people who know by choosing the president, they also are going to be selecting the one that will be choosing the next person to go on the Supreme Court. So they, with that in mind, go to the polls and make their choice. And what he's calling for, really, when you really think about it, it really is an outrage. Because what Cruz is talking about is that we should have a majoritarian view of who's placed in the court. so that if the people decide who the president is, knowing that he's going to choose the next member of the Supreme Court, then the standard is let the majority then speak, and through the majority, that person is placed in the court, because the president then, having been inaugurated, been elected first and inaugurated, will then go into the office and then make the appointment based upon the fact that the American people were privy to the fact that that's what he's going to do. And in electing a president, they are electing the person who's going to make that particular determination. That's not how it's intended to be. The way the process is intended to work out is that we choose someone who is going to have a fidelity to the Constitution. And if that choice is not made, then it's repudiated by the check and balance system through which the Senate has an oversight over it, and they turn it down. And it doesn't matter. And right now we have on the court, we have what they're saying, that we have 4 on the court who are liberals, more or less, and then, well, liberals pretty much. And they have 4 on the court right now that are, to some extent, and sometimes, because it doesn't always work out this way, that are conservatives. But sometimes you see these so-called conservatives like Chief Justice John Roberts going over here and voting Obamacare on 2 different occasions, voting with the liberals. And you see Anthony Kennedy on the Supreme Court, and he's up there as one of the swing votes, so is Stephen Breyer. And so they're in and out of these camps, so to speak. But the question is not what camp they go into, because what Scalia recognized was that when you go on the court, whatever your political views are, we're not electing politicians. We're not nominating politicians to serve in the court. We are nominating and we're confirming jurists. And wherever the politics are, you're shackled by the fact that the Constitution limits your options. And Scalia understood that. That's what made him great. It's going to be very hard to replace a person of that merit. And there are very few on the court who are like that. There are some, and they're probably the ones you don't like. But there's only one or two that's like that. And when you look at those that are supposed to be the conservatives on the court, how did you get Obamacare in terms of this extension of the government's power, when there's not found in the enumeration of powers on Article 1, Section 8. So how did that occur? In terms of this extension of the government's power, where they took over 1/6 of the economy, 16% of the economy is the healthcare industry in this country. And how that was taken over under some auspices of the Constitution, when the Constitution restricts government power and restricts it through its delegation of the authority of the federal government. In fact, the federal government was created by the states, and the states wanted to make sure the federal government did not assume more power than that which was being bestowed upon the federal structure. Don't forget, they come out of the mindset we have to restrict the central government because they had fought against central government over in Britain, and they were very frightened by giving too much power to a central authority, having come from underneath it, where it had gotten out of control in the parliament. And they did not want to replicate that problem over here in the United States. They had already had that problem. They did not want to replicate it here. And they tried it, first of all, with the Articles of Confederation. And that didn't work, particularly when you had the Shays Rebellion in 1786. And when that occurred and they couldn't come together to resolve that problem, they realized they had a problem here. They're so weak in the federal government, it could not respond to national crises, under which they were all then not under any kind of strong umbrella of protection, because if the Shays Rebellion happened in Massachusetts and they had other rebellions in other parts of the 13 states, then they had a problem they could not, in fact, respond to. So then the question comes up: what are you going to do about this new problem that you're now aware of, and how are you going to create a stronger federal government in order to resolve national crises that can come up that threatens all of the states? And they decided they had to create a stronger federal government, and that's what they did under the Constitution. But in doing that, though, what they did was that they simply wanted to itemize, okay, we are giving more authority to the federal government, but we are in fact listing and itemizing what that authority would be. And they delegated, you might call it the enumeration of powers, but it's really a delegation of the authority to the federal government. And they were saying they can do these things and cannot do the things that's not allotted to the federal government. And then they said things that are not expressly delegated to the federal government, nor prohibited by the Constitution to the states, reserved to the states and to the people therein. So there's a check and balance intended in the Constitution, and that is what is being suborned by these politicians who think that the rule of law is what they say it is. And they had this morning, I was watching Schumer. They call him Chuck Schumer. Charles. I don't know him personally, so I'm going to call him Charles Schumer, the senator from New York. And he was on television this morning, and his premise was that the Republicans should not stand in the way of the president making a selection, because that is his constitutional authority to in fact do that. And that's fine for him to say that if he had not said the opposite when the shoe was on the other foot. When it was a Republican president under the same circumstances that Obama finds himself in right now, Schumer, the Democrat, took the opposite position. And the question comes down to these people are deciding that the Constitution can be suborned and abdicated and dismissed based upon the politics. And that's not the intention here. We have a Constitution, and we have a Constitution all the time. And when the President of the United States has a vacancy, he is constitutionally allowed and really bound by the Constitution to make the appointment. And the Senate is duty bound by the Constitution to confirm or not confirm the appointment made by the President of the United States. That's how our system operates. And when you in fact say something other than that, you're saying something outside of the Constitution and rule of law, and you're talking about you're going to make it up as you go along. And we now don't have any law. We have rule by the political class in this country, and that is not the intention. The intention is very clear. The intention is to have government, not what Lincoln said, government not of the people, by the people, for the people, government of the Constitution, by the Constitution, for the American people. Government of the Constitution, for the Constitution, government of the Constitution, by the Constitution, for the American people. And when Lincoln said on November the 19th, 1863, in his Gettysburg Address, that government of the people, for the people, by the people should not perish from the earth, that was not the intention of the framers. The framers did not intend to have a government of the people, because when you have a government of the people, you have organized governmental anarchy. The intention was to have a government under the rule of law, under the Constitution. And if you say government of the people, then what people? And when they decide that they won't follow the rules of law, then what do you have in that case? You see what you have there, you'd have an anarchistic, you'd have anarchy. You'd have an anarchistic way of doing business. The government becomes anarchistic. And if you read some of Scalia's writings, you'll see that Scalia, and what made him great was that Scalia wrote about that and understood that. And he abided by it. That's what made him a great jurist and made him stand out from the others. How do you, I ask oftentimes, how do you have a swing vote, a known swing vote on the Supreme Court? Anthony Kennedy, that sometimes he's over on the liberal side of the argument, sometimes he's on the conservative side of an argument, when you really should have liberal and conservative sides of the argument. The argument is settled by the Constitution. But sometimes Anthony Kennedy is over with the Supreme Court Justices Eleanor Kagan, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Sonia Mayer, and Steve Breyer. And sometimes he's over there. And sometimes he'll be over there with, well, it was Antonin Scalia and Clarence Thomas. John Roberts supposedly is a conservative jurist. And who is the other person that, we said, and Souter would be the other judge. And of course, Scalia would have been on the conservative, probably the most conservative person on the court. But you really shouldn't have, you can have conservatives and liberals in terms of their political views and how they express that away from the bench of the Supreme Court. But on the Supreme Court, you're a jurist at that point, and your politics should be subordinated to what the Constitution requires, and requires you to be the interpreter of the Constitution. And in Cruz's case, and I made this point once before in a number of different places, and it hasn't gone over well because we think that if we like a candidate, we should not call him into the constitutional, to heal to the constitutional requirements. But I have said in the past that Ted Cruz is not even eligible to be President of the United States. He is ineligible because of the tenets and article, don't tell me, in terms of the Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. In Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, it talks about in order to be President of the United States, you must be a natural-born citizen. Now, everyone was very clear about what that meant when they were applying it to President Obama in 2012, because we had 4 years of Obama being in the White House, and people had decided that this was not what they had bought into and what he had represented himself to be in 2008. So they decided in 2012 we're going to bring about the citizenship question. The birth that stood up, and they said this man was not born in the United States. Well, of course, we now know that, and should not be any doubt about it today, that Obama was born in Hawaii. But they were making the claim, though, that he was born in Kenya. And if that had been the case, they were making the claim that if he had been born in Kenya, then he was ineligible to be President of the United States. I could buy that because I understand Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5. If Obama had been born in Kenya, no matter what the status of his mother is, and she was, of course, an American citizen born in Kansas, and the parents moved to Hawaii, and Obama was born there. But if he had been born in Kenya, I would have said the same thing I'm saying about Cruz. I would have said that Obama is not eligible to be President of the United States, because what is in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5 is very clear. And those conservatives who have now gotten a certain bout with dyslexia, they didn't have that in 2012 when they were calling the question in one case. But the Constitution didn't go away in that one case. It still is the Constitution right now, and I would call it in Obama's case if that had been the case. And I call it now because it's the case in Cruz's case, because Cruz doesn't deny his place of birth. Cruz was born in Calgary, Canada, and they're trying to make the claim that he is eligible because his mother was a citizen of the United States at the time of his birth. But that's not the requirement. The requirement is not, his mother's not running for president. The requirement is that he must be, if he's going to be eligible, if he wants to run for president, in order for him to be eligible, he must be a natural born citizen of the United States. And why is that in the Constitution? Is in there because, and if you read the Constitution carefully, you'll see it. It's in there because the fear, almost like a morbid fear, of the framers was the fear of treason. And I would tell these scholars, and they're not many, these constitutional scholars, those who claim to be that, and I don't consider Cruz to be one, is that if you read Article 2, and you go to Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, and you see where it says natural born citizen, if you go a little further over into Article 2, Section 4, you'll see the fear the framers had. Because in the same article that sets up the executive branch of government, you'll see where it calls for the president, the vice president, and all civil officers of the United States to be impeached and removed from office upon treason, and that's put number 1 there, treason, at the very beginning of it, bribery, and it says, and other high crimes and misdemeanors. They were morbidly afraid of the possibility of the president and other office holders of the United States to be involved in sabotage, subterfuge. They were afraid of that, and they did not want to, among all the office holders, because the president is a single executive office holder, the executive branch is the president, in other words. They want to make sure the president had the highest standard. And if you look at the Constitution, you'll see where that is the case in all the particulars as it relates to the president. Has to be older than the other office holders. The House is 25 years of age. The Senate, 30 years of age. The president, 35 years of age. Every time there is a requirement, it goes up for the president of the United States. Then the House of Representatives have to be a citizen for 7 years. Senate, 9 years. For the president, must be a natural born citizen, not required of any other office holder, but required of the president of the United States. And when they say they don't understand what a natural born citizen is, that is not the case, because it's very clear what they're talking about. Okay, we're going to wrap it up at this point for the I do want you to watch this process. I do want you to understand we lost a giant with Scalia, and now we have to replace a man who really can't be replaced. And just continue to watch the process, and let's hold these persons to the fact the Constitution does require the president to do what the president has to do here under Article 2, where the president under Article 2, Section 2, Clause 2 can in fact appoint the next Justice of the Supreme Court. That will end this session for the Comcast viewers. Okay, John, we're off there. Okay, then we'll continue with the discussion now that that is finished. We can now continue with the other parts of the program here. And I do want to talk about this a little bit more, because I think we have to understand that Scalia was one of those real rare persons that was what he called himself an originalist. And what Scalia was saying was he wanted to have when you look at the Constitution, to have the Constitution speak for itself by trying to find out what did the Constitution mean to those who wrote that particular part. If there's an amendment, for example, what did those that wrote it, what did it mean to them when they put the language in the Constitution? What was their meaning behind it? And really, I really feel that you really don't have to really too much look at the intent of the writers so much, because you see what I think everybody's missing is that language doesn't change over time. You know, when you write something down and you go back to the words, let's see, how long has this we ratified the Constitution in 1788. So from 1788 to 2016, let's go and add those years up. And then how have the words changed from that time period until the present time? The words have not changed. The meaning of the words are the same. So we could do what Scalia said, that you try to find out what the intent was of those who wrote the language down, but really the language has not changed. So you can, what did the words say? I do agree with him that we should not have, and nobody should claim that we have a living constitution, because if you have a living constitution, that's to say that you have a constitution at all. And Scalia understood that. If the Constitution means something today and means something else tomorrow, that actually ascribes to be the prescription is not to have a constitution, because if it's a constitution today and not tomorrow, then that constitution is destroyed tomorrow, because it doesn't go into what is assumed to be the case the next day. In other words, today cancels the constitution of yesterday out, so you don't really have a constitution. And what Scalia was talking about is not creating a new constitution by ascribing to something different when the language is not changed. But the language does not change, and if the language is not changed, the meaning is not changed, because language means something specific. And I argue a lot of times with people about the fact that intent is not sent to ratification. I mean, if I'm going to be the states ratifying the Constitution, I will tell you this: I have to ratify what you sent down there in terms of the language. And because we all can read the language, we're not dyslexia. We don't have dyslexia, and we can all read the language. What we read is what you sent to be ratified, and that language is very specific. Now, you can say later on it has certain implications behind it, but you don't ratify an implication. You ratify the language that's sent to you to in fact say this is what we are going to put in the Constitution. You put the language in there. And the language is specific, and so therefore you ratify it. For example, in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 5, it says, natural born citizen. Well, I think we all can agree, we're all born women. So a natural birth in terms of that is all of us born naturally in that way. Even if they are going to do a test tube insemination type of birth, the woman has still be involved. So the natural birth is not peculiar. And yet they're setting a peculiar standard for the President of the United States. So what would be the peculiar standard that they are setting that's peculiar to the President but not peculiar to anyone else? Because nobody else as an office holder has to be a natural born president, a natural born citizen in order to be president. It only is a requirement of the executive. So what were they saying here? And what they're saying is that they did not want to have a president that had dual loyalties. And you have dual loyalties if you're born outside the country. They are talking about soil birth. They're talking about a natural birth as it relates to being born in the United States of America. I don't even think you can be born in territories and have the, in fact, I know you can't. Because it says natural born citizen of the United States. And when you say United States, you're talking about today 50 states. At that time, there were 13 states, but they were united in terms of being under the auspices of the Constitution. They really considered themselves, really up until the Civil War, to be separate states. But they were united in terms of them coming under the Constitution, the mandates, and they were united in that sense. But they really they thought of themselves as having retained their sovereignty, because they felt that if there were things that were going on that were not constitutionally mandated, they could pull out of the Constitution, they could pull out of the arrangement and go in terms of their own independence again, because they had in fact voluntarily come into an association with each other, and when it behooved them to do otherwise, they could do it. That's the way they felt about it. And they tried to exercise that, as a matter of fact, in 1860 and 1861, and Lincoln told them no. And then militarily, they put down that, what they call an insurrection, down. But what they really put down was the states exercising their franchise and their agreement to voluntarily come together to form the association or the confederation. And then when it behooved them to do otherwise, they could retract that and do something else. And they tried to do that, and militarily they were confronted by it, and that was settled on the battlefield. But that was the intention behind that. They were doing the same thing in 1860. They had done in 1776, declaring a secessionist movement, because they felt that the government, in terms of having relinquished some of the authority to it, they felt that the government had exceeded the authority that had been ceded to it under Article 1, Section 8. And they thought that because they were going beyond that, that now that which they agreed to was not being conversant in what was being practiced. Therefore, they wanted to remove themselves from it, because the agreement they had made was not that. And now let me give you a parallel to that, because there was a parallel to that in terms of what happened this past Saturday in the debate. Some of you watched that debate, and if you notice that every time that Cruz said anything, he was booed, but nobody was booed on that stage Saturday more so than Donald Trump. Now, everything Jeb Bush said, everything Marco Rubio said, everything that John Kasich said, it was cheers from here to the other side of South Carolina. Everything they said was cheered. But everything that the outsiders said, I mean, they were kind of mom on Carson. I think they didn't boo too much in his case, because they don't think he's really he's no longer considered to be a contender for the presidency. So they kind of left him alone pretty much. But they were booing everything that came out of Cruz's mouth, what came out of Donald Trump's mouth. I mean, everything that Donald Trump said Saturday, it was just unbelievable how just a chorus. And Donald Trump stopped in the middle of one of his responses and said, just so you know, these are the donors that have been allowed in here, and this is Jeb Bush's group. Or I might have said this is the group supporting Rubio or some of the others. But what the Republican Party has done as another attempt to stop Donald Trump is that they have given the tickets out to the donor class. So those who have donated money to these candidates, they come in as part of the person in the audience. And of course, since Donald Trump's running an independent campaign, financing his own campaign, that he doesn't have anybody in the audience and other than his family. He said, my family is here, it's all that I have here. So the question is, how does that play out here in the larger arena? And what Donald Trump has said today, as a matter of fact, it's kind of like a warning in a way to the Republican Party. He told the RNC, Reince Priebus, the RNC chairman, and it's kind of like an undertone of a threat here. He said that this was not the agreement. And the agreement was to treat all the candidates fairly. And what Donald Trump is saying in all of the assaults is that if he does not get the nomination, and it doesn't happen because of some undermining that went on by the RNC, then Donald Trump is saying that the agreement they signed, we would not run as a third-party candidate, that agreement no longer exists, and he's not going to abide by the agreement. He's giving himself, what he's really doing is very subtle, but what he's doing is sending out a precursor, a preemption about them going forward with doing more things that will suborn and undermine his chance to become the nominee through going through the primary process. But what really is interesting, and what I'm looking forward to seeing next Saturday when they have the primary in South Carolina, I want to really see what those numbers are, and if Donald Trump comes out and wins in that election, because he took down some of the sacred cows in the Republican Party, and he talked about getting Bush 2, George W. Bush, different from Bush 41, right? George Herbert Walker Bush said that George Walker Bush lied about the weapons of mass destruction. Now, I don't buy that he lied. I think there are a lot of different intelligence agencies, those in Europe as well as the ones here, were reporting that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. And I quite frankly believe that he did have them. I think he shipped them over to Syria. because he used it on the Kurds a number of times, and he did have weapons of mass destruction. Just because you don't find something doesn't mean it's not there. I mean, that's a proverb they told to Leakey a long time ago, when Leakey was looking for the human remains, trying to find out the origins of human beings, and was searching in different parts, like the Adubo Gorge in Tanzania, for example. And he didn't find anything at first, and the Kikuyu told him, just because you don't find it, it doesn't mean it's not there. And just kept looking, and then they found what they now call the Australopithecus, probably the oldest humanoid that you have. They found some others in Ethiopia called Lucy. Who was that Swedish anthropologist? They called those relics, call it Lucy, because the song was on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, sung by the Beatles, I think it was. But the point I'm making here is that if you look at, and I'm talking about I want to come back to the Constitution, because if you can't find something in the document, you say it's not there because it doesn't say it in so many words. You have to read the words and then see what the words are saying. In other words, just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. It is there, but you might not be looking in the right way at it. You could be looking at something, and many of us have looked at. We've been at. They said about Carson's wife made a comment I thought was quite interesting. She said that sometimes he'll be looking for his glasses, and they'll be right in front of him, and honey, have you seen my glasses? But you're so preoccupied. And she said she'll tell him, honey, your glasses are right here. And he didn't see them because, you're so preoccupied with other things. Sometimes you don't see that which is right in front of you. And so just because you don't see something doesn't mean it's not there. And I say it is there. I say it's very clear in terms of what is placed in the Constitution. And they did write it, and they wrote it because they wanted to be clear about they had a different standard that they had for this person. Now, Trump is doing something with the person who I don't think is even qualified to be president, and he's telling them that he's not Cruz. First of all, Donald Trump and Cruz don't get along, and he may well challenge Cruz as far as the nominee. But what Donald Trump is saying to them is that even if you don't like Cruz, that's a different issue. My issue is that I'm a candidate for president also, and we have an agreement here. And the agreement is that I will be treated fairly by the RNC. And that means don't come in here stacking up the hall with people that will boo everything that I say. And they did that deliberately. I mean, if you listened to that debate, you would have thought that Donald Trump was saying things that's unpopular among the Republican constituents because he was talking about George Bush. And George Bush only had about 30% of the, at the time he left office in 2009, Bush was not that popular. And really his unpopularity is why Obama became president. But in the hall, because Trump said it, it was booed from here until the other side of South Carolina. But here is the thing. If the vote in South Carolina comes out and that vote for Trump grows, because you know what's been happening in this election cycle. And what's been happening is every time Donald Trump gets poured upon because he's a candidate that's outside and they don't really care too much about a lot of things he's saying because they want the outsider and they're willing to look over a lot of things he does. If his numbers go up after what happened Saturday, then although the establishment has not gotten it, they'll get it now. Because what that means is that people are so fed up with the establishment that they don't care what the outsiders do. They're going to stick with them anyway. And what Donald Trump is saying to the insiders, saying to the establishment, is that if this sabotage, and that's what they're doing, if this sabotage continues, and that somehow causes him not to be the nominee, then the third party option is back on the table. And it's real subtle, but that was a shot fired across the bow after this weekend, because Donald Trump saw what's going on. It's been going on for a while now, because they don't want Donald Trump as the nominee. And they want him for a number of reasons. Number one, he's a people's candidate. He's a populist running for president. He is also financing his own campaign. So nobody has money invested in him, to which he has IOUs out there. He only has IOUs owed to the American people, because if they vote him in, he owes them something, but he doesn't owe the establishment anything.
I got to interject here, though. I mean, some stuff I hear the Trump saying I think should be said and it should be followed through on. Some, okay, but the fact remains that maybe this is unfair, but you can see if you want to feel this kind of objection. I'm being the devil's advocate here.
Good.
I've had people ask me like, well, he's been aligned with the Democratic Party almost his entire adult life.
Right.
I remember I have a book at home. It was his biography somebody put together back in the 90s. And I found it down at St. Vincent de Paul about a couple months ago, and he actually said in this he was always connected to the Democratic Party and the elite. But then again, he turns around and does acknowledge basically his politics as usual, because he is a person who he's got to have government approval of stuff to move forward on stuff that you're connected to, because that was the party party du jour, or party of the area that he was dealing with primarily. He's a Democratic Party. They got a strong grip on the eastern sea line, But anyway, what would you say to people who would say he's been aligned with the Democratic Party? Why would you, as a conservative or a constitutionalist, be comfortable advocating for him?
Here's what I want them to understand, and I will give them a source for it as well. The source I'll use is the book called How Capitalism Saved America by Thomas De Lorenzo. And go to the back of the book, I think it's in chapter 11, where De Lorenzo talks about Bill Gates. And he talks about Bill Gates, who was running the Microsoft company and was a very efficient administrator, thought that all it took to do business was to get into business, run an efficient company, make sure that you're paying homage to the stockholders, because you have to try to increase profit so that they can get the investment out of that which they took a chance in. You take chances, you may lose, you may win, but it's up to the person that they invested in to try to ensure they win. What that means in Donald Trump's case, and what it meant in Gates' case, is that you have to understand the political order. You see, what the politicians have done is that they have found a place in the Constitution, surprisingly, of separation of church and state. Not surprisingly, they found nothing in the Constitution, although it's certainly implied, but they can't see it because, again, the blinders, that there's also implicit in the Constitution a separation between the economy and the state. But because the politicians have their hands on the economy, then those who are inside of the economic order, those who have businesses, for example, must pay homage to the fact that they're not free within the parameters of the politicians' control. And what I would say to those that find that Donald Trump was in fact getting along with everybody on both sides of the equation, that's the way you have to do it when you have the government having a hands-on relationship with the economy. And then when the government gets out of it, which they're not going to get out of it because that's how they finance their campaigns.
But I think is weird is everybody here complains it's not enough job creation. And how bad it is and how they want a job so they can actually realize their goals and ambitions. Then you have somebody like Trump who actually is a known job creator. And you also had that going on with Bill Gates too, but he doesn't actually. Those guys actually didn't create as many jobs in the United States as they did abroad. You know, him and Jobs, you know, Stephen Jobs. But I mean, then they turn around and they despise the same people after they get a good paying job. They turn around and vilify the people they work for. They will attack them at every turn. They gloat every time they get up on charges of something. And I'm saying, like, I can't see what Bill Gates did ever deserve to have, during the Clinton era, have the Justice Department after him so much. And yet, and he was a lifelong Democrat. And, you know, people say, well, you know, I had people tell me, like, I was concerned about what they were doing to Bill Gates. And they said, well, he's a billionaire. What did he care? I said, you know, just think with all his resources, he's still having to fight for his existence, basically.
Right.
Just think about how much easier they got to railroad you. You have no resources available to you like Bill Gates does. They could destroy you totally and not even be a blip on the radar.
If they can do it to Bill Gates with all of his money, then none of us are, in fact, safe. And we might well excuse it, thinking that, well, he can afford it, but none of us can afford it, because if they can do it to the least of us or to the greatest of us, then they can do it to all of us, because none of us can say that we are exempted from the might of the state. And until Bill Gates understood that you have to go with cash in hand to pay these people, I mean, really, what it showed there was the government is really nothing other than an organized mafia. And that is why the lobbyists go there, and they go there with money. And what they're doing is they're representing these companies that go there to pay these politicians to keep their hands off of their business, because they can come at them through these antitrust laws that were enacted under these progressives starting around 1887, 1890 with the Sherman Antitrust Act. A lot of these other acts were put in by the politicians in order to regulate business. And they are regulating business right now, where Ayn Rand is talking about this when she talks about it in her book called The New Intellectuals. And she also gets into this in her classic work written in 1957, Atlas Shrugged, because she has the motives of society. Those who are the ones that are creating jobs, the ones who are the most underappreciated members of society, but they are the motives of society, and they are denounced everywhere by the politicians first and foremost, because they're in competition with the politicians for influence. But they're also denounced by those whose hands they have given them something to do with their hands, the workers.
You know, that's a good part right there, because I think basically, I remember arguing with a well-known liberal in this area, but I won't mention his name, and he was saying, I said, well, if you keep on taking the money away from people, you're decentivizing them to work. And he went on this great thing, we don't work just for a paycheck, we work for our, for identity and stuff like that, and it wouldn't matter if they took everything from me. I know this guy's full of crap, okay, I know, because if I give you know who I'm talking about, if I give out the information, somebody else might pick up on it too, and I want, you really think I'm buying this bloated BS from you? I mean, you'd work if you weren't getting paid for it. Yeah, right.
Yeah, John, the persons that set business up, they don't deny the persons their paychecks, their wages, but yet those who they employ that allow them to get wages deny them and do not want them to have their profits. And it's amazing. I mean, I hear these basketball players, they want to strike because they're making $14 and $15 million a year, but the owners are making this much money a year. But why are they making $14 million? Because the owners have the entrepreneurial wherewithal to get contracts with the media, by stadiums in which they're playing in, and they want to look at what they're making, and they're not making what they're making over here, but they're making more money if they were playing out there on a sandlock, baseball diamond or a basketball court out in somebody's backyard. But they don't want him to make the money because look at how much he's making.
I think it's great that I think there's something to it, because these professional sports owners, they don't build those stadiums or the arenas. They get the municipalities to build them around there because they didn't realize. I mean, there's supposed to be this great incentive because of tax, because of the taxation purpose, creating jobs. Plus, now you can tax those people employed in those things. But still, they get, and that's where I have issue with and getting the corporations.
Well, the point is though that those skills are different at that level than the skills of those that are dribbling a ball up and down the court. What makes that relevant is that somebody had to package that. They didn't package it. They were out there playing basketball on somebody's basketball. The basketball court was somebody's driveway.
LK line, and this is about one of the only sports stories I know because I'm not really into it. But they wanted to pay him more. And he said no. He said, I'm playing a game that I love playing. I'm getting paid decently. They had actually forced him to take more money. And but he had such a great perspective on that. He had such a great perspective on it.
Yeah, he did. Al Kaline gave some money back when he had a bad year, by the way. He was appreciative of the fact that here's a game that he loves to play, and people are willing to pay him for it. Now, that had to be marketed. Somebody marketed that. And I don't know of anyone who works for an employer that makes more than an employer makes. And whoever had the idea of setting this up and having the wherewithal to own a team, and if they were so good at that, they could do the same thing in terms of a league of their own. I don't see them doing that, so that means that there's some special skill here that they have that basketball players apparently don't have. Otherwise, why don't they have their own league? They don't have that. The league are those owners. And that's where the revenue is, and they get their part of it, and they pay these guys according to what they contractually agree to. And I don't think that arrangement is unfair. But you have this. We have Labor Day. We don't have a business day in this country, and that speaks volumes about where we are. But
yeah, it's like it never dawned on me that we do. And I think we should.
Labor Day. We don't have business day.
So I'm blue collar. I appreciate the things and efforts that people do. I mean, nobody likes a job. I mean, I wouldn't want to work in the factories it was just fading out to actually be able to get a job when I came out of high school. Mm-hmm. But I mean, yeah, you're right. They don't appreciate the people. Okay, they look at it because they're well compensated, they wear suits, and they often will sit in air-conditioned offices. These people have no knowledge of what's going on the floor. Maybe they don't, but you also don't know what they're doing either. Mm-hmm. You don't appreciate what they possibly could be doing for you.
You don't even know them. The reason why in that book, At a Shrug, she had everybody asking, who is John Galt? No one knew who John Galt was out in the general public. But John Galt was the motor of society. In other words, he represented those who are the unsung, unrecognized heroes and sheroes that are making everything work. And what John Galt was doing was showing who he was by withdrawing what he had done in terms of building up this, so that they'll find out who he is when he's not there anymore. They found out who he was. Because when the motors of society vacate, now they don't know who they are. Okay, they're over in China right now. They're in other parts of the world right now. And what's happening here? Implosion is happening here. And they're leaving because of this turmoil and this turbulence, because the politicians are taking it over. Now, what I hope Donald Trump will do, being a businessman, what I hope he'll do, having been in business, and having some sympathies about who the business persons are, that he will do something that's very fundamental here. And that is get the politicians off of the backs of those who are the producers in society. And he's talking about that, so that speaks volumes if he does it. Because he's saying he's going around the country, he's running to a lot of people, and he said we need to unleash this tremendous spirit among the American people. If he does that, we're going to see a new America. And he's saying he wants to make America great again, and greater than it's ever been before. And the only way you can do that is return back to what was done before the politicians took over. The reason why America is collapsing is because the politicians are running it, not the producers. And as long as that is the case, we have a problem. Okay, got to get out of here. Glad to have Comcast aboard, and we'll continue to work on that and refine the operation there. We're going to get better at it. Glad you're with us this afternoon, and hope you will stay with us with all the programs here at allpointstv.com. And don't forget to follow your dream, because if you don't follow your dream, you'll never know what's on the other side of the rainbow.